Let's do it. Alrighty, here we go. My name is Marty Fox from WHITEFOX. Now, here's the deal.
So welcome to another episode of With the Fox. Marty Fox is here, and we're joined by a man who's no stranger to the, well, I want to say the news front, the journalism world, Tom Steinfort. It's great to have you with us. An incredible career so far, and I feel like you're only at the start of the next phase of your career. For those who don't know, currently the face of Channel 9 News here in Melbourne every single night. The anchorman. So actually, just starting on that point, is it funny for you? Because you would have grown up, same as me, we're similar age. Wherever you are in Australia, you turn the news on, you used to, 6 o'clock every night.
Well, I still do.
Was Brian Naylor.
I still watch the news.
Well, exactly. But there was Brian Naylor or, Peter Hitchener. That's now you for this next generation. Is that funny for you?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know. Sometimes I don't take myself very seriously. So sometimes I sort of see myself in that role and think, do people take me seriously? I don't know. But yeah, especially when I started out in the newsroom at 9, when your face was plastered on the wall there as one of the network stars.
One of us went on to greatness.
Well done. But, I think back to when I started there, that was like 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And just...
Is that 20 years with 9 or 20 years
20
in
years
reporting?
with 9, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And so, you used to walk in, and it was at the Bendigo Street in Richmond where they used to have all the stars up on the wall. It was such a great place to work.
It was amazing.
Like you could feel history oozing out of every wall. But I remember walking in there and it's being like, oh my God, I'm working at a TV station. And the newsreader back then was like the untouchable.
But it was Hitch, and Hitch was you'd walk in and he's so friendly and so gregarious off camera. And I had the same experience as you, which is you'd walk into the makeup room and there's Eddie Maguire and there's Daryl Summers, and you're like, I'm just a kid. I don't know what I'm doing. This is pretty wild. And you've had that for 20 years.
Yeah. And so, I don't know, but you do it for so long and go through all these different stages of your career that I guess once you get to this point, it kind of feels like the logical next step from what I was doing.
Very comfortable.
Yeah. And I remember the first time I had a news reading gig. When I started on Today's Show in 2019, the show had a massive upheaval and I became the newsreader on the Today Show. And at that point, I hadn't had a full-time gig like that before. I'd always been out on the road. And I remember being in that role being like, what am I doing here? Why have they hired me? But cool, let's give it a go. But not really feeling like I was perhaps ready for it.
So what was more pressure, being on the Today Show, which is obviously in every state, or being the anchor for Victoria?
They're really different shows. I mean, the one thing that you say off the top for Brekkie TV is that because you're waking up at 3:30 every day, everyone's neurotic. Like it's just that it's not a normal way to operate. That you get in and everyone's always a bit like, okay, where am I? What's going on? There's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. It's 3.5 hours of live TV every day. It's pretty full on.
Yes.
But the big difference I think that I've found is that when I started on that, there was a lot of negative noise around that show at the time, and it just sort of pervades every part of your life.
Yeah.
And coming into what we're now doing with...
and that negativity was Lisa and Carl. Was that what was happening?
What had happened was it was actually Georgie and Carl the year before, and then that was the year that Carl was... given a holiday for a year.
Yes.
But he's come back fresher than ever. And
look at the diplomatic. I love it. Jealous.
But so it was Deb and Georgie hosting, Deb Knight and Georgie Gardner, and I was the newsreader. And look, let's be honest, didn't work. But it becomes itself, like these things become self-fulfilling after a while. Like once you get enough negative noise around something, it's on a death spiral.
Yes.
And that show became a death spiral with us on there. And so it just makes all your life stressful. Whereas coming and starting the role on 9 News here in Melbourne, that Alicia and I have known each other for years. And I don't know, it just felt right.
And also you coming home because you're from Melbourne.
Of course. But the thing is, like, if every TV boss, if they knew the magic dust to sprinkle on a show, great. They'd put it on everyone. And you just don't know if they're going to work. But from day one, Alicia and I have always got along well and have got along even better since we started working together on the desk. And Tony Jones comes along and throws a hand grenade every now and then, and we all just go, okay, here we go. But it works.
But so you can feel it, because I was watching the news this week. I can't remember which night. And you can see it in your body language, like you guys, your mates, and like, how you lean in, and your body language has gotten a lot looser just because that relationship's just getting so much stronger and stronger. It's great to watch.
And that's what I mean about it being a self-fulfilling prophecy. When there's positivity around something, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is working, and you relax into it. And then all of a sudden, people realize that and the show works. And thankfully it does. Like people, our numbers, you hear a lot of negative noise around, traditional TV at the moment and the challenges facing that sector. We were up 14% year on year last year, and we're up year on year again this year. So people have seen what we're doing and are liking it. And that's, I don't know, it's really rewarding to have taken a punt, which they did, putting in a couple of relatively young newsreaders together and a pairing. It's always traditionally been a single reader in the Melbourne market. And they took a punt. We didn't know what was going to happen. It might have blown up, but it worked.
It's funny though, isn't it?
It's working. Let's not say it's worked, but
it is
at
working.
the moment it's working.
It really is.
You're a jovial person. You've got a good sense of humor and you're lighthearted. So for all intents and purposes, the Today Show works for you because you can be a newsreader and also have that personality. However, as you said, the challenges of the early mornings. Tell us about news reading in Melbourne, because in a way, and I've chatted to a lot of newsreaders over the journey about this, you have to find that happy medium of delivering bad news, because let's be honest, the bulk of it is negative in a way that still feels like, hey, it's going to be okay. Is that fair? What's the training? Tell us about how you have to do that to still convey, because you're talking about deaths, murders, interest rates, all the stuff that kind of hit pretty heavy.
Yeah, like is it constant training or is it you developing?
Yeah, I've never been. No one's ever sat down and said, hello, welcome to news reading class. Here's the rule book. Just study that. We'll test you at the end and off you go. Everyone has their own style. You kind of pointed it out before. I'm probably a lot more relaxed, bordering on too relaxed for that kind of role. Like it is supposed to be pretty serious. As Shura said, it's pretty heavy content, a lot of it. But I don't know, for me, my thing has always been, and I remember having a chat with someone early on and them saying, I find some people when they try and tell the news are a bit too serious. Like it's not relatable. And someone said to me early days that, I don't know, the best delivery is just like you've sat down at a table at the pub with your mate and you want to tell him what happened today. And so I was like, you would not believe what happened today. So 3K down there was a home invasion. They've jumped into the house. Not only have they come in while these people are sleeping, they've held a knife to them, took their cars, nicked off, and then they've gone a K down the road and broken into another house, done it again. And I just think when you can actually, I don't know, talk a bit more like a human, it kind of works. So I don't know. I think the way that I try to do it is a bit more relaxed and a bit more sort of personable.
Like you're talking one-on-one, but you're talking to the entire state.
Yeah, and like you try and not, lighthearted is the wrong word, but just that sort of, you're having a conversation as opposed to delivering a sermon, maybe might be the best way to describe it.
And so you're 20 years in now. What was the very beginning? Where did you study? What was the road in? Because there's obviously a love for journalism, but then when you're in this position, it's less journalism and it's more, you're one of 9 stars. You're the one that's delivering the research that you would have done in the past. But then you've got 60 Minutes. So tell us through your journey.
Yeah, so I grew up in Glen Waverley, youngest of 5 kids there. And you talk about a love of journalism. I actually had no idea what I wanted to do. Like it wasn't there's some long-held passion. But luckily enough, during year 11, when my parents were at their wits' end, they said, you've got to pick a career, mate. And so Jared Waitley went to my school, who a lot of people would know now. He's with SEN and does the footy commentary. And at the time, he was sort of a young up-and-coming reporter at Channel 10. And so we got in touch with Jared out of the blue and said, hey, would you mind if Tom came along and did a bit of work experience with you? So I went along, had no idea what I was doing. And I remember we were just going to footy training every day and, going, and I was like, you get paid to do this? Well, sounds pretty good to me. Go and watch a footy each day. So, all of a sudden I thought, oh, this could work. And, applied, luckily got into journalism at RMIT, and the whole way through the course, it's a really competitive industry, super competitive. And they would just basically say,
you won't make it.
You're probably not going to get a job. Let's be honest, kids. Like, good on you for coming in here and trying, but the majority of you will not end up working in the industry. And to be honest, they're true. Like that was true. Because when I look at our university class now, I'd say 95% of them are no longer journalists. So they were right.
Yeah, but 95% of the population is now journalists, thanks to
that's
social
true.
media.
That's true. But yeah, so I just sort of assumed all along that I wouldn't get a job and whatever. And lo and behold, I was pulling beers at a pub when I got a call from Win TV which is, for people that don't know, Channel 9 in the bush, basically, saying, do you want a job in Ballarat? Full-time reporter, 30 grand a year. And I was like, oh, I've made it. I have 30. What am I going to do with all this money?
Based in Ballarat.
Based in Ballarat. So I up stumps at 20 and moved to Ballarat, and sort of it's all flowed on from there.
And how long did you stay in Ballarat?
2 years there, which were two of the most enjoyable years of my life. I had a ball.
So, and why was it so fun?
Well, two fronts. One, they throw you in the deep end there. Like, it's just,
You're doing everything.
you do 3 stories a day. Just go, I don't know. And there's not a lot of oversight. Like, it's just like, go out there and get all your mistakes out of your system, son.
And we're talking like the local roadworks of, stop traffic and
sheep
a cow.
crotching in the Wimmera. Like, I remember doing a story on that once and having to like Google, what's sheep crotching? Oh, crikey, okay. Oh, that's interesting. But yeah, all sorts of stuff, regional issues, which is good because you actually get to learn the ropes of, calling up Joe Blow out of the blue and being like, hey.
So you find the story, you write the story, you deliver the story.
You find the story, you call up people and say, do you want to have a chat about this? Yeah, sure, whatever. Bowl up to, Warrnambool or Hamilton or wherever it may be, interview someone, come back, write it up, cut it up and put it to air.
And then a lot of the time, are you shooting it or you've got your camera crew?
At that stage, there was still a bit of money in regional TV, so we all had a cameraman, which was good. I think these days, a lot of it is sort of video journalist produced, so they've got to shoot it as well, which is another layer of, skills they can learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was great out there because they throw you in the deep end. And the other thing was I was 20. Like, it was just fun. Like, everything's fun at 20. I'd turn up there and joined a footy club because...
What was it like going to the pub? Being the reporter?
The journo.
Yeah, being the journo.
Yeah, I remember funny about that time in my life was I was so young that Sunday was what I called shaving day. So I would shave once a week. Sunday, have a shave, and that'd get me through to the next one. Like, that's how young I was. And you're just going out and everything's exciting.
So then 22, you come back?
Well, you may not know this, but Tom's from a pretty successful family. So 2 brothers played AFL. One sister played, correct me if I'm wrong, basketball for Australia.
Yeah.
And his other brother is a lung surgeon. So,
and then the anchor man.
Like, right, what are you doing?
I remember in like high school, like sort of, I was stocky young lad in high school and just being like, oh, what am I doing? Like, there was a fair bit of pressure, but it's that kind of rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing, that there was that pressure of everyone else achieving, and sort of by osmosis, if you're surrounded by successful people, that it does sort of, I guess, lift your game to a certain extent. And but yeah, I did feel a fair bit of pressure. I didn't like it, to be honest, when I was young.
Do your folks tune in and love it?
Every night.
Every night.
Every night. They're absolutely my most loyal supporters, like daylight second. And Dad will text me. And I was sick last week, off work. And, every night Dad tunes in at 6:01 to see if I'm, back in business and that kind of thing. But yeah, some nights, the great, we had the premiere on the other week, Jacinta Allen, and, she was on at 6:05, and by 6:07 I had a message from Dad saying, great interview, you really pressed her hard, and that kind of thing. And sometimes
it means a lot.
But it's true, but sometimes I'm like, do you mean that? Like, you're just going through the motions, but they're so engaged and they love it and they care so much about it, which is great when you've got, 5 kids, and I was number 5, you might lose a bit of interest by then, but no, they're amazing in terms of their support no matter what.
So 22, as Marty said, you've now worked in Ballarat. You come back, and Win or Channel 9 have said, now come to the big smoke. We've got a role for you. Is that right?
Yeah, and stumped up there at Bendigo Street, and again thought, I don't know why I've got a job, but anyway.
And what was the gig?
Guess and run with it. So I was a reporter. But I was doing what was called chase shift, which is you're the first reporter in, so you just go out. Yeah, they send you to whatever happens overnight. Like, there's been a house fire.
Yeah, so you're not like
a shooting.
The crime reporter. You're the one that is across multifaceted.
Yeah, you're the bottom feeder, basically.
Got you.
Which
is what I call the schlepper.
The schlepper.
I was
the schlep.
I was absolute schlepp city at that point. So, but I didn't care. At that age, whatever. Like, it's a gig. I'm working at Bendigo Street, Richmond, Channel 9. It's exciting.
The home of TV.
But I walked past Bert Newton in the car park and say good day, and it was all just a thrill at that point. But
Alicia Loxley's probably there then. Clint Stanaway,
yes,
Ed and Woolley, some of the big names
Ed and Woolley, yes.
Chris Jones was probably
Jonesy, yes, who's now at 7.
Yeah. So it was a good crew of young journalists, though.
When you look back at, so this is how sort of iconic it was then. They used to have what they call Millionaires Row, which was a row of desks in the old Bendigo Street one, which is where they used to have all their like good reporters. And then over time, a new lot came through, and we were all absolute young pups starting out at the same time. But as turned out to be pretty good. It was me, Alicia Loxley. It was Jackie Freegard then, now Jackie Felgate,
yeah.
of course, of 3AW and social media fame.
Social media fame.
Probably a lot more social media fame. And also Paul Kennedy, the ABC sports presenter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we all sat in one row down the back there and have sort of kicked on to various things throughout our career. And then, yeah, you had Stanners and looking through the glass into the sports department. Christina Hearn was in there.
So what's the thing that like people, I remember talking to someone like Jennifer Adams, who I'd worked with over the years. The thing she told me about the newsroom that people don't understand in terms of what gets fed in, you guys see a lot of stuff, some of it quite heavy that the public never sees. Like tell us about that, how the world of journalism works for you guys in the newsroom.
Look, and it sort of evolves over time, but there's always, and this is what I come back to a little bit in terms of people saying, oh, the news industry is under pressure. There will always be news. There will always be political coups, car crashes, whatever it may be. So it's always about how you get that information and how you get it out to get that information out to people. So, back in those days, we used to have people just cold calling the newsroom a lot, saying, "Hey, I can see some fire on the hill. What's going on there?" And we go out and check it out. And these days, it's a lot more social media tip-offs and that kind of thing. And then you bowl up out there, and often, I've got to. I remember getting to a car crash once. We were there before emergency service. We just happened to be in the area. And someone had called the newsroom and said, there's been a terrible crash. And we were around the corner. So the chief of staff calls, says, go down there. And we got there and it's like, I don't know. I kind of don't know what to do. I'm before first responders. Like I can see,
this person's not going to make it.
Yeah. Things you don't want to see kind of thing. And so, yeah.
So what happened?
Well, it's just
they were
no longer with us.
Oh no!
Yeah, and you're just like, I don't know. You want to be useful, but what do you do in that situation?
How do you speak on camera after something like that?
Well, you just got to put your big boy pants on it and get on with it, kind of thing. I've seen some shocking things over the years, and it sounds a bit cold, but I'm not paid to be emotional. I'm not paid to.
Well, you're desensitized with that information.
You do to a certain extent, yeah, and they're much better about it. Like I remember back then, it was like, yeah, good on you, mate. It's part of the job. Get on with it. And these days they are a lot better. That they work has a lot of services of employee support services and that kind of thing to help people with counselling who've been to horrific bushfires or terrible crime scenes or whatever it may be. So they're obviously as with all businesses that have evolved and become a lot more sensitive to that stuff.
And some of those deeper, more they're harsher stories. That's what underpins a lot of the 60 Minutes stories. They're big, big, big stories. When did you first get onto 60 Minutes and what's that been like?
Yeah, so 60 Minutes sort of came about in a funny way that I was working, I think I was in the newsroom in Sydney at the time, and I had sent the most random request. I was bored at work one day, and every now and then, it's probably like you guys chasing, leads and that kind of stuff of people that want to sell a house. But for us, it was, every now and then you just send out 50 emails to, I don't know, President Obama's office and stuff being like,
would you sell?
You're prospecting.
Yeah, seriously. But then it's just like being like, would they be like, oh, this cute little Aussie, oh yeah, we'll give him an interview kind of thing. And like, of course it's not going to happen. But sometimes it does. And like I've had a couple of instances in my career like this where I emailed the North Korean government being like, hey guys, hope all's well up there.
Do you remember where you were when you sent the email?
Yeah, I was just in the office in Sydney. And this was like in...
And you thought, I'm just going to email
I thought,
the North Korean government.
Yep. Yeah. Which is like, tell a rational person that and they're like, you're an idiot. Anyway, did it. And this was like 2012, I reckon. Anyway, 2014, out of the blue, I get an email saying, hey, Tom, North Korean government here. Did you want to pop in? You just wire us some money and off we go. Come on in, meet us in Beijing on this date and we'll fly you over. And I was, I thought it's like one of those emails from a Nigerian prince asking for $100 million or something.
And how old were you at the time?
So 2015, I would have been 31. 31. And I was just like, yeah, pull the other one, good on you. And then I was like, I'll write back anyway. Get on the phone, start having chats with them. I was like, they're fair income. And so I just went and told my boss, and I was like, hey, bit left field. Should we go shoot a story in North Korea? And they were like, again, good on you, mate.
What were they asking out of curiosity, money-wise? Are you allowed to say?
Not insignificant amount.
Yeah, okay.
We entered into some negotiations. Tried to talk that
In
down
the local currency or in
euros,
Okay.
funnily enough.
There you go.
Euros?
Yeah. So we had to withdraw euros and turn up there with euros in cash.
And they wanted cash.
Yeah, wanted cash because it's illegal to transfer money to anyone in North Korea. So we could have been arrested. They wouldn't have. Their money would have been cut off. They wouldn't have been able to access it.
And are you allowed to do these interviews, or how does that work?
Well, yeah.
And was the interview in North Korea?
Yeah, so we spent a week in North Korea.
I remember watching that story. That was really cool.
It was so weird.
So tell us.
Anyway, this is how I ended up in 60 Minutes. I told my news boss, and he was like, "It's quite a big effort for a news story." I feel like there's more to it. So
and what was your position with Nine at the time?
I was just a run-of-the-mill news reporter in Sydney.
Wow. So this is like a junior agent listing a Turak thumper.
Yeah. Precisely,
Correct.
exactly. And so I had to call up the boss of 60 Minutes and be like, hey, do you want to shoot a story in North Korea? And again, they were like,
And to not take
What
the
do you want
story
about?
off you and give it to someone else.
yeah, really delicate
How
balance.
did you protect that?
Might have told a couple of white lies. They've said
Yeah.
it's only me that can go. Sorry.
They want me. They want Tom.
I've requested Tom Steinfort.
They said we need Tommy. So I just told them that I've got the offer to go into North Korea if they want me to shoot the story for them. And so it happened. We spent a week in North Korea, probably the weirdest week of my life. And it's every part of it. It's like the Truman Show, but meets Squid Game or something like that.
How brainwashed are these people?
It's a real balance of brainwashed and just purely living in fear. Because there are some that, have drunk the Kool-Aid and whatever, but there are heaps that you can see, you can tell looking in their eyes that they're like,
Scared to say anything.
go the leader, but they know that they're only doing that because they won't be around much longer if they don't play
and do
the
these
game.
people, are they out playing, soccer in the fields? Are they, what are they doing? Are they at restaurants? Are they having fun? Are they having beers? What are they doing?
There's so many. So we get taken on a guided tour for a week. And so you land in Pyongyang, and each day they've got 3 or 4 things on the itinerary, and they'll take you here, there, and everywhere. And so, you'll go to a restaurant and, look over there, there's families having abundant meals, and they're all playing along of, ha, the country is great, haha. And
It's curated to
So everything's
that's
curated.
what I mean by the Truman Show, that it's just like, it's all a facade. You can tell, because then you drive from there to the next place and you just see these like destitute people sitting around all in grey clothing. It's miserable.
So
it's so miserable.
No happiness.
No. And like the kids are happy. They're running around playing soccer, whatever. They don't know any different. But the adults, you can see just this dreariness of life.
So it's a prison without walls.
Prison, yeah, but they've got walls. They'll be shot if they try and leave the country. And some of them get out. And it's interesting. We spoke to a few people that escaped who lived in South Korea, and they then could tell you the truth. And the really sad thing talking to them is that they say they've come out to raise the alarm to the world about how messed up it is in North Korea and the horrible things that are being done by that regime. And part of them coming out and telling us that, and you say, okay, so what about your family? And they're like, they've probably been killed.
Yeah.
Because they escaped.
They
It's
fled.
like a cult. It's like someone leaving a cult, isn't it? Like
Absolutely.
something,
It is a cult.
And these people that you've interviewed about escaping, how have they escaped?
Literally ran the border. It's the only way.
Oh, it's the only way. You just
Only
got
way out.
to
You've
go
got to
for it.
find a point of weakness in the border and do a runner.
And
on the South Korean side, they're great. Like they actually try and help anyone that gets out. And there's full blown charities there that are set up to support people who have escaped from the north because they know how bad it is up there. But yeah, imagine the guilt of deciding I've got to do this in the hope that for future generations I can raise the alarm, but in the process maybe my family will get killed. Like what an awful decision to have to make in your life.
So what did this story do for you? What was the sort of, was it like, right, you're on 60 Minutes, well done.
And it's a great question because in all business, when you get a win, you have to know how to leverage that win to then prosper. And what's even more disappointing is when you get the win and you do nothing with it. So what did you do?
Yeah, it was around the same time that I became our Europe correspondent. So I moved to London and sort of covered all the sort of big events over there.
How many years in London?
It was about 2.5 in London with a bit of time in the US as well.
Amazing time.
Incredible. And
With your wife or as a single man?
no, I was single. So met my wife just after I got back from Europe. But yeah, it was just, and probably best to be single over there because it's such a, like I think I went to 40 countries in the time that I was in Europe.
And you're banned from a few, aren't you?
Yeah, fair few. Yeah, I'm running out of, you know what my problem is? I'm running out of options to get to Europe these days because I can't go through Thailand. I can't go through China. I can't go through the UAE. So basically Singapore and Qatar are my only two stop-off options.
So you're banned from those countries?
Some I'm banned from and some I don't want to find out if I'm banned from, but I know that their government hates me.
Is that a journalist's path? Is that common for
Oh,
is that you? Is that you? Is that
sensible
Tommy?
ones
We
don't
want
really
Tommy.
take that path.
It's so funny because people find you obviously through TV so conservative, but you're so not conservative. Even on the pickle court, he's got lip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
A lot of fucking.
Yeah.
I don't want to put up with your nonsense.
So you can
bloody
imagine
hell.
him at an airport checkpoint. Can you
Oh.
imagine if someone pulls him up?
Yeah, like definitely don't want to go through Thailand. We really offended their king.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And why not Dubai?
Dubai. I wrote a book actually and did a series of stories for 60 Minutes on the ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed.
That was released 2 years ago. That book?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And so he's got a fairly checkered story regarding what he's done to his family, particularly one of his daughters.
Yes. I actually watched that.
Yeah, so they're not big fans. But anyway,
There's
So-
no fatwas though. Or was there a fatwa on you?
oh, probably.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I look at it now, like, you know, life's all about different phases. And I did this when I was young and single and, you know, it's kind of all on your own shoulders. And would I do these stories now as a married father of 2 kids?
Probably not. No,
Yeah.
because I'm thinking about that story, and it was a pretty heavy story, and you're going after probably the most powerful person, or one of the most powerful people in the world. But was there ever fear like, well, it's not that hard for him to actually get to you if he wanted?
Yeah, I've had anxiety over the years. Like you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're like, maybe
I shouldn't have done that.
Am I the next
maybe,
Khashoggi or whatever his name was? Yeah.
No, but seriously.
Yeah,
like-
no.
And that's a great one to reference because these guys don't muck around.
No.
Like,
Wait, say that again. What were you
So that-
referencing?
Khashoggi was he Saudi Arabian?
Saudi Arabian
journalist
journalist Jamal Khashoggi,
who
and
got basically cut to pieces.
literally, I don't know whether you remember, the Saudi government, he'd been relatively critical, but not like crazy. But he was a Saudi journalist, and they lulled him into this. The ruler allegedly wanted him dead, so they lulled him into this trap where he had to go to the Saudi embassy in Turkey. They got him there, suffocated him, chopped him up into
Dismembered him,
pieces, and then put him in a barbecue. And then
Yeah, you're definitely not coming to the White Fox Dubai launch.
I haven't upset the Saudis, I don't think. So,
Across the border. Yeah. So
but that's what I mean in terms of like,
Yeah.
sometimes you think, what are they going to do? Who cares? They don't care about a journalist. And then you see that and you're like, yeah, okay, no.
that's why I always thought it was very brave of people like Louis Theroux, for example, who would go to, you know, the Ku Klux Klan and talk to them about what they do, or, you know, white nationalists and stuff. It is a brave choice of career because there is some risk in it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and even with like going to North Korea again, like we were monitored the whole time we were there, and like they've killed. His name escapes me. The American man who also got knocked off by the North Koreans, and
So you were still fearful for that week.
That week, I was absolutely sweating bullets the whole time. I remember taking off out of Pyongyang to fly back to Beijing and just being like,
You
We
did.
made it.
oh,
We
thank
made it.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when we were there, like one day, every day we go out filming and we're staying in this bizarre hotel, 45-story hotel. We were the only people in it. And they're like, okay, this is weird to start with. But then we're like, they're probably monitoring us. And one day we go out to film and just the cameraman and I were like, take note of where the zips are on your suitcase. And go out, film, come back at the end of the day. And come back, the zips were all in a different position.
Oh.
So like they literally were going into our rooms every day, opening our suitcases, going through all our belongings to keep tabs on what we were doing, what we were filming, and that kind of stuff. So you're like, they're not mucking about. Like if we put a foot out of line here, we're in serious
You're
trouble.
toast.
And so again, like it's that idea at the time, it's a bit of a thrill, and you're like, what a great story. And similar to like when we went to Ukraine at the time, you don't think about it. You're like, what a great story to go and hear the war's breaking out. We're going to chat to the president.
So you were in the Ukraine as the war's kicking off.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks into the war, we went over there to interview Zelensky. And same deal, that I look back on it now, I'm like, what the hell did you do that for, you idiot? But
And that's with 2 kids.
we had one kid
One.
at that stage. Yeah, we had a 3-month-old at home. What was I doing? But at the time, it was an amazing story. It was the biggest story in the world. And it was also an important story. Like, it's not just the idea of like, oh, what a great story for me. Like, it is actually a huge story to bring to Australian audiences, to sit down and get perspective from President Zelensky about why this matters and why Australia should support the Ukraine.
How did you feel from, meeting Zelensky, interviewing him, to then a couple of weeks ago watching him with Trump, and your experiences with the whole situation?
I was sickened, to be honest. Like, he, of all the people to pick a fight with in the world, why would you hang him out to dry? Like, it was just disgusting. And I know that I'm sure it's part of a bigger just negotiation, and this was their tactic. Like, they clearly brought him in there to make an example of him. But when we interviewed him, like, there's not many people that I've interviewed where afterwards I've just gone, wow. Like, he's just Captain Charisma. He comes in and you can see why the country has rallied behind him, because he just, I don't know, he talks and you sit there and go, you know what, you're right. You're right. You could sell sand to the Egyptians. Like, just absolutely, he speaks and I'm like, I agree. And it's not just, he's not just selling you nonsense. Like, it's a great, powerful story of a country getting bullied and against all odds, standing together, these people, and saying, no, we're not going to let you bully us. This is our land, our country, our people. And so to then see the disrespect he was shown in the White House, I don't know, and then you cozy up to Putin.
You got a first-hand look at that, though, because you were in America during the first campaign trail for Donald Trump, and you said that you saw what others didn't, because we all saw it as a joke. Oh, yeah, come on, here we go. This apprentice, the TV stars, if he's going to be president. Well, what did you see? And you would attract him from
no one thought it was going to happen.
No one, but he was there. So you must have thought it could happen, and it did.
Well, I remember going there thinking it wasn't going to happen, but this is going to be a laugh, isn't it? Like, we're all coming along for the ride, and let's go see how Donald goes on the campaign trail. But no one's actually going to vote for him, are they? Like, how stupid. And then you get there, and we would go to, so 2016, it was Donald versus Hillary Clinton. And so I spent the last 3 weeks of the campaign there, and you'd spend a few days with Hillary. And
was this with 60 Minutes, or was this?
This was with 9 News at the time. So I was just a correspondent on the campaign trail with them, and fascinating. Like, people sometimes will describe journalism as the first draft of history, and this felt like history. Like, it was one of those few stories where I was traveling around going, I'm watching history unfold. Like, it was so cool, just from a journalistic nerd sense of being like, wow, this is amazing.
So the guy that didn't want to be a journalist ended up becoming a journalistic nerd.
Yeah, really nerded out on that one. But so we're traveling around with Hillary, and you go to some of her campaign events, and there'd be a couple of thousand people there, and it was nice and whatever. And then you go to Donald Trump's campaign events, and there'd be 15,000 people there and going nuts,
like a party.
Yeah, but like more of an evangelical event than a party. Like, they were just like, hallelujah,
whatever you say,
the Savior has arrived. And it was palpable, like the passion that was coming through that. And
did you find yourself getting caught into it?
No, but it's easy watching, and I think people need to sort of keep this in mind when you watch coverage of US politics, is that most of it comes out of Washington, New York, or Los Angeles, and they are very progressive cities. And so they do tend to have a progressive slant in terms of the way that they analyze, what voting demographics want. I don't want to get too deep into sort of politics, nuffy stuff for people, but like, you don't get perhaps the full picture from some of those people. And so traveling with Trump, we were going to, your Wisconsins, your North Carolinas, your Ohios, the places that don't really get a lot of mainstream coverage on big outlets. And it was fascinating to see what actually matters to people in these smaller areas and how they felt completely left behind by the system. And so a lot of Trump's, support is in a way a protest vote of people who are like,
They've had enough.
I can see all these elites having a great time. Good, half their luck. What about me? My life's gone backwards.
Which is ironic because the elite is the one that they're voting for, which is hilarious.
Yes, of course. The ultimate irony. But when you got nothing, you got nothing to lose.
Totally.
And so this is where a lot of these people that we encountered in 2016 were, that they were like, Hillary Clinton's part of the elite system. I've gone that way for years.
We've seen Bill, yeah.
I've played the game.
Yeah.
I've seen how it ends. I don't like it. What have I got to lose? He might be crazy. He might say some offensive things about women. Who knows? Let's find out. And that was sort of the basis of our coverage in there. It was like, no, guys, this is a real thing. Like, people are loving him here, and they will take this option because they are so repulsed by everything else in the political system that maybe an outsider is what they need. And so, yeah, I just remember in those days.
And because he was so familiar to them, because they'd watched him for so long.
And he's a salesman. Like, he's a good marketer. He tells people, he knows what people want, and he knows how to tell them that he'll fix it. And so, you know, in the days leading up to the election, while I still think a lot of people around the world in 2016 were like, no one's going to vote for him. We're like, no, guys, this is a thing, and it's every chance of happening. And as history shows.
And how long did that take for you to then see that he was probably going to win?
I still didn't really believe it until it happened on the night, but I do think on that day, I thought it was a 50-50 toss of the coin.
So what did change from that point on is he kind of coined the fake news, and that whole thing, that's now changed the entire journalist game. And I would say that apart from real estate agents, to be honest with you, the least trust people now are journalists, in all seriousness. So from your point of view, how do you look at journalism now? Because I made a joke before about everyone being journalists, but that's the truth now. And we look at news sites on websites and stuff that have misspelled, headings and this is not what you started at a time when, The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, they were like banner heads. You respected and you loved them. People have distrust of them now, and CNN and NBC and whatever else. The game has changed. How do you see it from your point of view? The trust of what you say.
And that's such an interesting question, and certainly one of the biggest challenges that our industry faces going forward, because back then you either watched 7 or 9 News or you read the paper, and that was kind of it. You didn't have other options.
And you believe everything.
Yeah. Yep. And these days you have 1,000 different ways you can get the news from God knows who. And so the challenge we face now, I guess, is trying to give ourselves a point of difference. And I mean, there's a few ways that I would sort of show that like a 9 News is actually where you want to be getting your news. Because one, I mean, there's a track record of just telling the stories that as they are. And exactly, accuracy. I remember there was a little while there where there was this race to be first with the news. And I think that's thankfully peeled back a little bit. And now the focus is on
get it right.
We'll get it right.
Yeah, you better be right than first.
Yeah, so we'll try to be first, of course. But it's more important to be right than to be first. But second, some people are out there starting up media outlets, having a go. Good for them. But there's a lot of people that don't give a shit about facts. They're just out there to try and make a name and spin a bit of excitement and a bit of controversy. If I look at like the 9 newsroom on any given day, like there'd be 60, 80 people working there. Like it's not, you might see Alicia and I on the desk and Tony and Lavinia and then, some reporters in the field, and it's a massive operation of people at all different levels, from producers, editors, the bosses, admin, chiefs of staff, whatever. It is not just some fly-by-night operation. There are so many layers of people working to make sure we get all the information, cross-check it, that kind of thing. Like you can't sustain a newsroom that big without getting it right.
Well, what's fascinating is that they actually turn around that work within 24 hours or less. Because it's
hopefully less, otherwise I'm out of a job.
But that amount of people, that amount of information, that amount of filming, cutting, editing, delivery, that's around the clock.
It totally is, and this is why it costs a hell of a lot of money to run a newsroom like that as well. So it's a serious commitment. If 9 wanted to do it on the cheap and say, it's all right, we'll just have like a few people out on the road and save some money, you're not going to get the quality of journalism and reporting. So I think the fact that they've committed so much resources shows they're actually serious about doing this properly, which I would suggest that a lot of those random YouTube, Twitter accounts not really that committed to accuracy and doing it properly.
Have you caught much feedback out in the public from people being like, you lied the story about COVID or whatever? Like, is there a bit of that?
Yeah, you do cop a bit. I mean, funnily, the most abuse I've ever copped was probably on the campaign trail with Donald Trump. Literally having people just screaming in our faces, spitting at us, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Wow.
And you're like, every time I'd say, how many 9 News Australia stories have you watched? Because if you
Over
have,
here in Ohio.
Is it worse than?
tip of the hat for your commitment.
But what about when you're walking down the street and then the Channel 7 anchor walks on the other side of the street? What's that like?
Yeah, it's like Anchorman. Yeah, just drop the shoulder. No, I haven't seen Mitch out on the road actually. Yeah, look, you do have some people that don't like you, but like I'm sure there's some people that don't like you. It's one of the parts of doing our job is you've got to get used to the fact when
You're going to have thick skin.
when your profile grows, there will always be people that don't like you. It's AFL footballers. Like, I'm sure Nick Dacos walks down the street. I'm not comparing myself to Nick Dacos, but Nick Dacos walks down the street and there'd be 80% of people would say, Nick, you're legend. And there's 20 people that say, boo, you shit, and whatever. Like, it's just part and parcel of having a bigger profile in the game is that there will be people that hate you.
I
And
like how you didn't say Carl or Paddy Steinfort.
no one recognises them, mate.
Mate, you've covered some of the biggest stories in modern history, I would say. Let's go through a couple of them and just rank where they sit for you, because you were Michael Jackson death trial, Oscar Pistorius trial, which is a massive one. Obviously some natural disasters, earthquakes, Japan, obviously Donald Trump. Where do you rank the sort of stories? North Korea's got to be up there, but where do you rank some of these stories you've told?
It's funny, in terms of ranking, like the biggest stories, look, I still think going to Ukraine during the war was probably the biggest or the wildest, certainly, just in terms of like all day hearing air raid sirens and just thinking.
How close did any of those explosions come to you?
Well, I remember we would go out and film the following morning. You could see places that have been hit overnight, still smouldering and that kind of thing. And one of the silly things I look back on now and think, what on earth were we doing? Nine sent over, to their credit, sent us with a former SAS soldier to make sure that we were safe on the ground.
Full-time bodyguard.
Full-time bodyguard who would also be, checking security updates and making sure. And I was like, guys, the biggest threat to us is a missile strike. What's he going to do? Like stand there and put his hands up and like try and block the missile. Like if a missile comes, we're cooked, no matter what. So yeah, just looking back on that and thinking, I mean, it's pretty.
What was the conversation like with your wife before flying?
She was amazing, to be honest. I remember calling her and being like, "Oh, she says no, don't go. Just don't go." Like simple. That's voice of reason. But she was like, "Oh, of course you got to go. Of course you got to go." So that was really, if she said don't go, I don't think I would have gone. I just think I would have been racked with guilt going over there in the face of that. So yeah, thankfully she was really supportive, and I think she was just appreciative that I turned up afterwards. Yeah, so that was pretty crazy. I mean, some of the ones that I look back on, again, the most, I guess the scariest is some of the earthquakes that we've covered. Like a lot of natural disasters, floods that we've covered, bushfires.
Which earthquake?
Did a couple.
Fukushima?
Fukushima in Japan. You remember the big meltdown there. We got there we flew overnight after it happened. And a couple of days later, we were in Tokyo and there was a 7.4 earthquake aftershock. And I remember we were on like we were staying at quite a nice hotel, and we were up on the 50th floor or something. And I just remember hearing this rumble and being like, the hell is that noise? And then clicking, oh my God, it's an aftershock. And thankfully the buildings there are built for earthquakes, but
you're still 50 stories up.
Yeah. And it was like sitting on top of a palm tree. We were just swaying side to side.
Oh, you're joking.
And I was just like, I have never felt more helpless. Because what are you going to do? Hide in the doorway.
So,
like,
and did you
SAS card again?
Yeah. Did you
exactly.
genuinely think, shit, these things could topple over?
Totally. And you're just like, there is nothing I can do. I'm just going to sit here and just started rocking more and more. And then the glasses start sliding off the table and smashing.
How long did that last?
30 seconds, I reckon. There was another one probably a worse one in Italy again for an earthquake, and we went there, and the night after there was an aftershock, and it was in this really old town. It was a lot of like old, mud brick buildings and beautiful, picturesque Italian town, but you wouldn't exactly say it was the sturdiest buildings. Yeah, and so we were in the hotel, and it was about 2 a.m. Again, you hear this; it's the eeriest feeling because bushfires, you know where they're coming from. Floods, you know where the water's lifting. Earthquakes, you got no idea when it's coming. There's not a lot you can do. And you hear this rumble. It woke me up at 2 a.m. lying in bed, and I heard it. And you're asleep, so it takes a minute to process. And you're like, "What is that noise? What's going?" Oh God, aftershock. And then again, feel the building start to shake. I could hear glasses smashing, and then I started hearing buildings collapsing outside. And it's 2 or 3 doors down, and these other
and it's dark.
Yeah, and like, oh God, I know what that noise is. The building just collapsed. And thinking of like, when does this give way? And again, what are you going to do? You can't.
So did you run outside or?
What did I do? No, I just lay there. Because I was on like
Isn't the bathtub? You meant to be getting the bathtub.
I just in my head, I did the math of like, I'm on the 3rd floor. I'm not going to make it downstairs in time. And if the building goes down, the bathtub ain't going to save me. So I just lay there and sort of swung for a bit and was like, is my number up?
It's so weird. You've had 2 like moments in your life where you're just sitting there just waiting.
Yeah. Am I about to die? And then the rumbling stops. And you're like, oh, and I text the cameraman. I was like, did you feel that? And he's like, what the fuck was that? He was like, oh God.
So two last big questions on journalism and stories. The first one is on, as I said, you were at Oscar Pistorius trial, at Michael Jackson trial. With these big high profile trials, what is it that we don't understand or don't know about how they're run and what the access you're allowed to these stories?
Yeah, it varies so much country to country. And what I will say is that Australia is by far the worst in terms of access to courts.
Really?
The amount of court stories.
Suppression and...
Totally. The amount of court stories that are going on in Melbourne right now that we can't tell you about.
Really? Wow.
Don't want to lead too many conspiracy theories.
Why is that?
Astray. The main one is that they feel in Victoria that it could damage someone's reputation irreparably if they're found not guilty of the charges, which I understand to an extent, but
where there's smoke, there's fire.
Wow. Yes, but also if you're found not guilty, then clearly
you're not guilty.
One of the greatest examples of that have to be Underbelly. Do you remember this? We were living in Melbourne and Betty King was the judge and she wouldn't let anyone in Victoria know the names, but Underbelly, the show, was being shown. So if you had to get DVDs delivered from Sydney to people in Melbourne so we could watch Underbelly because the people in Underbelly were from Victoria. And
I remember having like a roster where we were handing around the Underbelly DVD.
Episode 1.
And all the
Gangitano.
The naughty DVDs come from Sydney.
Yeah.
So Victoria is by far the strictest jurisdiction getting around in terms of, I got to be honest, covering up what's going on. I think open justice should be a pillar of a good court system. And unfortunately in Victoria, the powers that be see it very differently. So thankfully in South Africa, for instance, we shouldn't be led by, what goes on in South Africa, but unfortunately they do it a lot better than us. But yeah, it's a very open system there where we used to be able to sit in court. I'd sit a metre away from Oscar Pistorius as he was...
he's just been released.
Yes, he has. And fascinating case. And everyone has an opinion on it.
It wasn't clear cut, but it sort of was.
Do you really think he thought it was an intruder?
Yep. I actually do.
Yeah, you do.
Yep. I genuinely, and it sounds a bit like Melbourne again. When you're in an environment where home invasions are so common, naturally you are more predisposed to be paranoid that is what's happening in your house. Now, do I think he wanted to kill the home intruder? Yes. So whether he thought he was killing a home invader or his girlfriend, in some respects, is kind of irrelevant. He wanted to murder someone that was in his house.
Because it was through the door.
Through the door.
He was shooting someone through the door.
With no legs on.
With no legs on.
As he said,
yes, that's
down,
right.
so
He was down. Yes,
that's correct. And they paint, they talk through the fact that he felt hyper vulnerable because of the fact that he didn't have his legs on at the time. Yeah, so that was really interesting. But again, you're so close. And actually, I just think it's important that the public gets to know exactly what's going on in these cases, because if you only give them a certain part of a story, then they're not getting the full facts. And I think people are smart enough. I've got faith in society that people can make enough of an educated decision when given all the facts. And people make bad decisions when they're not given all the facts. That's why I think, if you lay it all out, and this way, even when you're approaching someone about a story and they don't want to answer questions, to me, always that's a red flag. You're like, well, what are you hiding? So I always just think sunlight's the best disinfectant. Put it all out there and people can make their own decisions.
The second question was, how prepared are you in the newsroom for the big breaking story? Because you consider like the big ones in our lifetime, let's be honest, the World Trade Center, when that happened, newsreaders all over the world had to be on. Some of them for like 18 hours, I'd imagine, just sitting there telling the story. Have you done any of those sort of breaking stories like that, big ones? And are you prepared for it? Is it just like it could happen and just be ready?
Yeah, there's two kinds of those big breaking stories, I guess. Ones that you kind of know might happen or will come, and ones that are completely out of the blue. And so when I talk about the stories that you know might come, so for instance, a really bad bushfire day when you've been warned about it. So I guess you kind of have a day or two to prepare. And then, everyone's on alert for, a big fire might break out. And another example is, I'd say, the Queen dying. I'll be honest, we'd been preparing for that for 20 years. In the newsroom, there's a folder of obituaries on standby, and you don't really want to ever end up on that. But that means you're not far from kicking the bucket, and there are stories ready to go for. So for the Queen's. In the Queen's case, we had days of coverage lined up, ready to go. So when she died, I ended up co-hosting the coverage out of Sydney there for days afterwards about that. So for that one, we kind of knew it was coming, but there are other stories that come out of the blue, like you said, of terror attacks or whatever that you could never prepare for. But in a sense, it is kind of a little bit like muscle memory. Like once you've done a couple of big breaking stories, you do get used to, okay, places, everyone, let's go. Pizzas will be delivered to the newsroom. Tell your family you'll be home tomorrow, and let's all knuckle down. And it's, it's kind of what you alluded to earlier, that most of the big stories are bad stories. And I'd say...
Were you working, Sydney, during the siege at Lynn?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That was another example of, sort of non-stop overnight coverage.
Well, I was in Sydney, and it was just, it was constant.
Yes. Yep, I was in Paris when the Paris terror attacks happened. Those kind of, like, I just remember though, I was sleeping maybe 3 hours a day for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Just non-stop. And adrenaline can do a lot of things that, they're often horrible stories, but it is kind of what you sign up to the job for, is when the big one breaks, that you want to be there and actually help people understand, okay, this is what has happened. This is perhaps why it's happened. This is what it means for you, and what it means for the world at large.
So here's one, because all three of us have young children. Personally, at the moment, with my oldest being 8 and then 5, and similar to Marty, and I think you're a little bit younger, but still, I shield them a bit from the news, if I'm honest, because of that negativity. If on the radio, it's like, let's turn this off. A man was killed today in a house fire, in a bushfire, because I know it's
the home invasions.
Home invasions.
I try and make sure the kids never see it, because it's nearly every second night.
What's your discussion with your kids? Do you talk? I mean, I know they're very young, but like.
Yeah, my girls are 3 and 1.
Yeah.
And it's a funny one, because they actually ask my wife every night to watch Dad on, for them, it's kind of, isn't everyone's Dad on TV? Like,
it's much easier for mine to watch The Block.
It's a little
some of those blow-ups, mate.
Actually.
The bullying.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. Often, and thankfully it's around dinner time, so my wife can sort of stall them a bit, and then they'll usually tune in about 6:30, I reckon, when things get a bit light and fluffy and sport comes on and weather and
what time do you walk in the door?
Normally just after 7:30, I reckon.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so we sort of record some evening updates after the news, and then I'll try and scoot out as quick as possible. Our youngest will, my wife will put her down, but our oldest won't go to sleep until I come home. So I come home and put her to bed every night, and it's like, it is the best. It really, honestly, like when I was at 60 Minutes and I used to go overseas, our oldest at that time was maybe 1, and I'd come back from 2 weeks overseas, walk in the front door and like kneel down waiting for her to run up and be like, Dad, but she was 1, she didn't give a shit. So yeah, you're home.
Did you go? I didn't even know you went.
And you're like, oh, cool, thanks, mate. Whereas now, every night when I get home, the pounding up the hallway is just like, your heart.
Yeah, very full cup.
Yep, totally.
So if we're watching it at 6, when did you film? Is it like
live,
what,
mate.
what's
Live, baby.
I don't know, but in terms of like what's the delay? Are we talking about a 30-second delay, 15-second, like, or is it's full live?
I think it's literally live. I think by the time it bounces around a couple of satellites and stuff, we have a off-air feed up in the far corner that I can see. I reckon it's maybe 4 seconds behind when we're talking.
So there's no option for them to edit anything that comes out of your mouth.
Not to give anyone any ideas, but yeah, if someone barged in there, we'd have to cut to black.
Yeah.
Well, this is why, like, if an
it's
auto cue goes
like,
down or something like that, that's a big
yeah.
deal.
I'll tell you, the pressure on a nightly basis is there.
Yeah, mate. If you want to know it's live TV, just watch. I stuff up enough. Don't worry about that.
But you know what? In all seriousness, I did live TV, which was kids TV. So again, it was like you can't swear or do anything wrong. It's kids, right? There's something funny about when that red light goes on, whether it's radio or TV or whatnot. You just switch to a different person. You're just on. Yeah. And I think that's part of it. And it's more exciting that way as well.
It's so much fun. It's kind of the one thing I loved working at 60 Minutes, but I came there from the Today Show and news prior. And some of the best fun you'll have in TV is live TV. Like it just, again, adrenaline, all of a sudden.
Anything can happen.
The eyes widen a bit and you're like, okay, here we go. And I used to find when I did Today Show.
It's probably what your siblings get from playing sports, that same adrenaline.
Totally. Yeah.
Or your surgeon sibling as well. It's you're all adrenaline junkies.
Better than heroin, I guess. So we'll go with that. But like when I was doing Today Show and you'd be on there, it's live TV, 3.5 hours of live TV every single day. So 5:30 to 9 a.m. And you come off air and I genuinely would fall asleep. We would have a 9:15 editorial meeting and I'd get in there and often I'd be coming down off the adrenaline so much that they'd be talking and I'd fall asleep because it's such a high and then you crash.
So how has Carl been able to do that for 20 years?
Carl's a beast.
Like
he is one of a kind. It's incredible. And he is on. Like it just and straddles that line so perfectly about what you're talking about before, where you want to be taken seriously, you want to convey the big political story or whatever's going on, and then being able to just so smoothly.
Is he one of the best talents you've ever come into contact with?
The best. In terms of that ability to segue into then being the jester.
I still haven't had a chance to sit down and have a chat to my Serbian brother. I can't wait to meet him properly.
We've got to.
Haven't met him properly.
Haven't met him.
Not properly and sat and had a chat or a coffee. It's always been quickly in passing.
I'll have to just send him a photo of this couch and say, mate, they're waiting
You're
for
next.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
correct.
We'll send him a selfie. That'd be great.
He's amazing. And as I said, just that ability and to do it day after day after day after 20 years of
beast
and come up and just turn up with the same energy every day and have that sort of vibe of, has he had 2 schooners before he's come on here? Like just that relaxed bit of fun. And
I remember being in first year uni, living in New Zealand, missing Melbourne and watching Carl every morning, just dreaming about, I can't wait to get back to Australia, and just watching the Kiwis on the news. I couldn't watch Kiwi news, and then watching Carl. I was the only guy that was in my flat that was always watching the Australian news, never the Kiwi news, because of Carl.
Yeah.
Like he literally, I woke up with today.
Well, he's had such a good career because he's popular, because people love him.
Yeah, no, but he was just, because he was young. He became, I think, the host of Today when he was like 30.
He was super young when he started out. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was
had his just trajectory from there. He got sent to the LA bureau for 9, and within 6 months they pulled him back and made him Today Show host. And I remember when he started, everyone was 2 fronts. One, they were like, who's this bloke? And second, after a few months, they hated him. He copped so much bad coverage when he started. They called him the robot, and because people don't give new talent a time to settle in. They just expect them to, be seamless from the start. And these jobs, it takes a bit of time to get used to, but like he's just so good at it now, so good, and so supportive of a lot of young people coming through as well, which doesn't.
Well, I'll hold you to try and get him on here.
If he doesn't come, it's your fault. All right, last question before we go. What's the story you either wanted to tell and couldn't, or that was never able to get to? Is there something that you wish you were able to tell, or you had and you weren't allowed to?
Ooh.
Have you ever been blocked by the news where they've said, "Sorry, Tommy, you can't tell that story"?
It's too juicy.
A couple of stories about you, I think. Nine publicity
with
at the time.
With
said,
Grant Hackett at the Logies?
Yeah.
Keep that under
Never
wraps.
happened. I actually can't think of any.
No, probably not. No, probably not. But mate, it's an incredible career. Let's be honest. Like you've told some of the biggest stories of the last, couple of decades. You've been there. You've risked your life in all seriousness, and now you're in our lounge room every night. Like it's pretty awesome. And to be honest with you, it's the sort of job now you could have that for 20 years. You could be doing this, what you're doing right now.
I think
for
you will.
Next couple of decades.
And it's a bloody pleasure to call you a mate. It's really cool.
No, thanks for having us, guys. And yeah, it's weird listening to, when you go back over it all, you're like, oh, wow.
Done a bit.
I've done a bit,
It's
haven't
pretty,
I?
it's pretty big.
And, thinking back to that kid that started out when you were at 9 and just thinking, wow, if someone told me this was all going to happen, I'm like, nah, no way. Like it's been a great ride.
Take that, Carl. Take that, Paddy. The Steinfort boys who played AFL. Your brother's now more famous than you.
No, Paddy's
done very well. I'm sure they've all done great things. Either way, mate, we really appreciate you coming on and good luck with the future on Channel 9.
Thank you, gents. Great
Thank
to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy.